As a part of our business, just the approval of our minutes. Alex circulated the minutes a couple of days ago. Are there any comments on any of the minutes that were circulated? Okay, well, can I have a motion to approve the minutes, please?
So moved.
A second, please.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you. The minutes are approved. So I think to accommodate Mark Pelka's schedule, we agreed to have him make his presentation first. I think he's under some time pressure. Understandable. So Mark, you want to share with us the information you've brought?
Absolutely, Judge. And don't worry about my schedule. I'm here till the end. I just thought that the presentation I'm prepared to share would be a helpful kickoff to the updates from the different agencies because it shows some of the recent trends. And while I work on sharing my screen desktop with you, I'll note that this presentation is updated really up until this morning. We know that there is a increased focus on correction population trends as well as all other criminal justice trends as they, especially as we move through this emergency period responding to the pandemic. And so my coworkers in the Criminal Justice Policy and Planning Division's research unit pulled the data we have available to us and put together about 6 slides that show some of the recent trends, and many of them go up until actually today or end of, or beginning of April or end of March. So kudos to the folks on the team that did the work to get this presentation together. We want to begin by sharing an area chart that many have seen before, showing Connecticut's correction population change from 1993 to 2020. And it demonstrates that the correction population has dropped 40% since its 2008 peak. That's down by about 8,040 people from February 2008 until April, up until this month. So that's the background that puts us into this current review of the correction population size. This chart here reflects all people under DOC custody, both pretrial and sentenced. And you can see the lead up period from 93 to 2008, which includes substantial growth. And I think many of you who have worked in the legislature, in the community and agencies that work to impact this part of our criminal justice system should really celebrate the impact that has been achieved, especially over the last decade when these trends were accompanied by reduction in reported crime and arrest. This chart here depicts the most recent information regarding the correction population. This chart shows that in March 2020, the last month, the correction population decreased by the largest monthly percent on record. And under current trends, April is on pace to eclipse March. The chart shows the daily percent change of the correction population from the start of the month, every month since 1988. This chart, the gray lines, each line on this chart depicts a monthly trend in the correction population, daily change from the start of the month until the end. And you can see most group around the 0. That reflects modest change in the size of the prison population from the beginning of the month to the end of the month. The orange line depicts March, when the percent decrease in the correction population from the start of the month exceeds all previous periods since 1998. And in absolute number, it's actually the second largest drop on record in the correctional population. The blue line shows up to April 17th, today, from start of the month, and you can see the percent decrease with each day of the month is also down by an even larger percentage than March. So we will continue tracking these trends in the population. They will be presented in greater detail for the month of March in our monthly indicators report that will be released by the end of the month. And we are looking forward to digging further into this data to provide more analysis in the form of a presentation. This table here shows the change in the correction population from March 1st to today, April 17th. Between those two posts, the correction population has dropped by 1,022 people, with roughly equal percent reductions in people held pretrial or sentenced. You see in the left column the components of the correction population in Connecticut: sentenced, pretrial, and other. And interestingly, the percent change between March 1 and April 17th is roughly the same for both sentenced and pretrial populations. The pretrial includes anyone held on bond or awaiting disposition of pending charges, whereas sentenced includes anyone serving a term of incarceration imposed by a Connecticut criminal court. So it's helpful to see that combined, the correction population has dropped by 8% between March 1 and March 17th.
What does the others represent?
The other includes special parole remandees, so people who come back into corrections following a special parole violation, and inmates incarcerated at the DOC from other jurisdictions, including federal.
And that's down more percentage-wise than the other two.
They are, sir. The other makes up a much smaller share of the total correction population. It's just 324 people compared to out of a set of 12,000. So it is much smaller, but that does give you some insights, I think, into the special parole population and just efforts to provide more community sanctions as opposed to revocations. In March, Connecticut's correction population dropped rapidly because admissions decreased and releases increased during the month. So this chart here shows monthly changes in admissions to prison, the correction population, and releases from prison beginning on January 15th up until March 2020 of last month. That black line that courses through those columns reflect the changing size of Connecticut's correction population. So in most months where you see that the black line drops by a small margin, you can see fair parity between the number of admissions and the number of releases. And that's why we tend to see fairly little modulation in the size of the correction population. When you get down to March, however, you see the size of the admissions really shrinking, as well as the size of the releases there. So you can see why March is such a outlier month in comparison to many of the previous ones, where you see that the line is fairly even in its movement with equal size of the admissions and releases above and below that line. The chart does not begin at 0, so this really exaggerates the trend, which we thought was important to show, I guess, depict the movements. What we want to do next, and on our last slide, is home in on the blue bar, the releases that you see in March, to really understand what caused those movements. And in a chart like this, I wish I had done animation so I could have caused things to pop up all at once, as opposed to what might be a little bit jarring to see a lot of slides. So I'll work through it bit by bit, but I think this is a pretty, this information helped me to understand dynamics quite a bit in the trends. Between February and March of 2020, discretionary releases of people sentenced to DOC climbed 72%, while end of sentence releases fell by 17%. The discretionary releases of people sentenced to DOC consists of a variety of discretionary exits from the DOC. The main components of discretionary release are approvals for parole, approvals for transitional supervision, and approval for halfway houses. So those are populations that were reviewed on a discretionary basis using the statutory guidance provided to various criminal justice agencies to identify appropriateness for transition to the community. So as I mentioned, between February and March, just a 1-month period, the number of people exiting from DOC on discretionary release jumped by about 3/4. And that had the positive effect, the positive secondary effect of reducing the number exiting on end of sentence. As you all know, end of sentence is a population that the DOC is legally required to release from its custody at the conclusion of their court stipulated sentence. And so the increase in number of discretionary releases reflects effort from various criminal justice agencies, mainly the Department of Correction, to review suitability and appropriateness and eligibility for discharge, and developing reentry plans to identify sponsors and suitable addresses and options in the community so that people can transition out from the DOC. This shows you the raw number, and you can see that the number of exits on discretionary release are higher than any of the prior 12 months of data that are included in this slide. We also wanted to home in a bit on percentages. So this shows you, again, absolute number. The lower right, that column down there shows you the percent of sentenced releases by discretionary and end of sentence. So 69% of people from this group exiting DOC exited under discretionary release, as opposed to end of sentence, which comprised about a third. That's the greatest disparity between those two options over the 12 months of data that are reflected in this chart. So I think it reflects some trends that are well known and experienced, I think, by people on this conference call or video conference, which is the front end trends that are caused by stay-at-home policy, by reductions in arrests, by perhaps changes in setting of bonds. All those factors plus others have contributed to a reduction in the number of admissions to DOC on the pretrial and in the sentenced populations, which enabled the department, in concert with its criminal justice agencies, to shift emphasis toward the reentry planning side to help a larger percentage than over the last 12 months to prepare for transition to the community, and had the secondary benefit of reducing the number exiting to no supervision under end of sentence. So we tried to put together for today's meeting as much as up-to-date information as we could to help to share the emerging narrative regarding the work that's happening in the criminal justice system since the onset of the public health emergency. I think the takeaway I wanted to offer from where I sit is that it reflects a lot of these trends, when I zoom out, reflect how criminal justice agencies, along with community partners and scholars and other providers, have worked to adapt to the circumstances. And we're only short distance into this period, but we wanted to share what's emerging to us as we look at the trends. And I know we have several other updates from different agencies, and so I thought this could be a helpful bit of background and context and data for folks as they reflect on and provide updates.
That's great, Mark. Thank you very much. That's really a good piece of work.
Thank you, sir.
This is Brian Sperry from the Court Support Services Division.
Can I ask, can people hear me now? This is Gary Roberge.
Yes, I can hear you, Gary. Yes.
Okay, thank you. I was on the phone in my office before, and I wasn't coming through, but I've since gone to the computer. So I just wanted to let you know I'm here as well.
Great. Great. Welcome.
All right, so hopefully everybody can see my PowerPoint presentation here. So we were asked to put together some initial descriptive stats on the use of 10% bond. So this is an attempt to take a look at a few different areas. And we're going to take a look at the volume of 10% bond, what that means in terms of a proportion of overall bond, sort of the dollar amounts and locations where where 10% bond is being utilized, and a very initial look at some outcome information. So just a little bit of background. So I think most of us are aware that January 1st, 2020, there were some changes to the practice book where, unless otherwise ordered, 10% by the judicial authority, 10% cash bail shall be automatically available for surety bonds not exceeding $20,000. So, that differs from what was in place prior to that, where at arraignment, judges could order a 10% option, but it was not automatically put into place. So we're looking to describe the 10% bond utilization across 3 different decision points. So defendants have the ability to post a 10% bond at a police department after booking, but before interview by bail services. After a bail interview occurs non-court, defendants have a relatively small window to be able to to effect a bond prior to their arraignment in court. And for those defendants who make it to court and have a financial bond ordered at the time of arraignment. Again, we've got data for 3 months. That doesn't provide us a lot of ability to look at a lot of trend information. We've got kind of 2 solid months, and March is certainly going to be anomalous. Another, in this look, and as we look at criminal justice activity, March and April are always going to be anomalous just due to COVID-19. Because of that, we're going to look at data. We're going to be able to compare to the prior year. So we're going to take a look at 2019 and 2020, and we're also going to look at, focus on bonds that are 20,000 and less. So the first decision point is around that police, defendants that are released at police departments prior to a bail interview. So what we're looking at here are arrests that were released at police departments. So these are custodial arrests that were released at police departments prior to a bail services interview. And we can see that we've got 2019 by month, and then the first 3 months of 2020 over on the right-hand side. And we can see the emergence of the 10% bond option coming in January. So in the first 3 months, there were 1,523 10% bonds that were posted at this decision point, which is about 16% of all releases. Now, this is including promises to appear and other non-surety bonds. As we look, if we focus on financial bonds posted at the police department, we can see that this represents 34%. 34% of the financial releases have been 10%. So 1 in 3 since the beginning of the year. That's really a fairly big difference. So we can see, certainly a decrease in cash-only bonds and in surety bonds being posted at the same time. When we look at the dollar amounts that are being posted here, again, we're going to look back over a year's worth of financial bonds. These are surety bonds, professional surety bonds that are actually of any amount. So we're grouping the over $20,000 bonds with a bunch of under 20,000. We can see that primarily the 10% bond option is being utilized with low money bonds, right? So between 78 and 60% of these bonds are $500 or less. Typically, in that group, you're going to see the bonds of being actually right on the $500 mark. But we can see that that's primarily low dollar amount bonds at this decision point. The number of bonds being posted that are over 20,000 actually increased slightly during 2020. I'm not sure why that is, but we can see that this number has ticked up a little higher than it has been over the past year. Another interesting effect here is that when compared to cash bonds, we see a pretty big impact here, and the relative sizes of these numbers precluded a more visual presentation, and I apologize for that. But if we were to focus on if we looked at Q1 of 2019, we can see that there were 649 cash bonds posted, again, at the police department prior to an interview by bail services, primarily comprised of $500 cash bonds. And in Q1 of 2020, that number is reduced by 53%. So we see, 251 bonds at the cash-only side, and 864 10% bonds that were in that same $1 to $500 range. So it's really reduced the reliance on cash-only bonds that are being posted at this point. And I would imagine that it's easier to post 10% of $500 than it is to post $500. So I also wanted to take a look at where cash bond or 10% bond is the most prevalent. So we're taking a look at the top 20 police departments that saw these bonds being posted. So we can see number one here, Danbury Local Police Department saw 102 10% bonds posted during the first 3 months of 2020, and that represents that's over half of the financial bonds that were released, 61% to be exact. So we can see in these maybe more affluent large cities, we see a little bit higher volume here. In the biggest cities, the utilization is more like 1 in 4. Any questions so far? All right. When we take a look at failure to appear and new arrest, this really presents a lot of challenge for us. We really don't have enough soak time on these cases to be able to make any real determinations about behavior during the case of pendency. Court cases that were, arrests that occurred in February may or may not have had one continuance between then and now. Their continuances are probably delayed due to COVID. But I wanted to take an initial look, and I would ask that we focus on the January numbers. We can see that we can look at new criminal arrest rates among all of the bond types that were released at the police department. And we can see, in January, there were 748 promises to appear, and we saw a new arrest rate of about just under 6.5%, just over 8% for non-surety, 5.73% for 10% option, 9% for professional surety, and 3.65 for cash only. I will note that that's the smallest group by a good amount. And the same thing during for failure to appear. If we look in January, again, 10% seems to be on the low end of experiencing adverse outcomes in terms of failure to appear in new criminal arrest. Again, these are very preliminary numbers, and I really wouldn't draw any conclusions from these. We really need more time to be able to build up enough of a data set to look at this with a little bit more accuracy. But I did want to kind of point out that even in these early months, these cases don't seem to present any kind of problem or anomaly at this decision point. All right. When we move on to these non-court bail services releases, again, these a relatively small number of clients are able to post their bonds during this window, just because of the small number of it. This could be a short number of hours, typically the middle of the night to early the next day, or potentially an entire weekend. But we can see that when we look at all bonds posted by dollar amount up to $20,000, that in 2020, just about 1 in 4 of these defendants are utilizing a 10% bond release at this decision point. So if we were and we can see that it is more prevalent, again, 10% is in gray there, and it is more prevalent, at the lower bond rate. So we can start to see this trend where this is really, benefiting defendants who are held on relatively small bonds. When we look at financial bond being ordered at arraignment, we can see that the same pattern emerges. The judges have been able to order at this decision point. Judges have been able to order a 10% cash option historically. So when we look at 2019 data and then also disaggregate by dollar amount, we can see that this is typically we can see 18% of $500 bonds, 12% of $1,000 bonds, for example, during 2019. During 2020, we can see that for those same period, for those same low bond amounts, that 2/3 of the $500 bonds at arraignment have been posted using a 10% option. Over half of the $1,000 bonds, and it decreases as the dollar amounts go up. So this shows that there is an increase in utilization both at arraignment as well as prior. Now, I will say that for defendants who are able to facilitate a release, to be able to post a bond on the date of their arraignment and not transport back to the Department of Correction, their 10% bond utilization is over 30%. For defendants who do get transported to the Department of Correction and who are able to arrange a bond post from there, the likelihood of them using a 10% option is cut basically in half. So we see about 17% of those bonds that are subsequently posted using that 10% option. And that's pretty much it. So we can see a trend here that roughly 1 in 4 of these financial releases are being made using this 10% option across all of these decision points. Maybe a little bit more at arraignment, but that seems to be where this is happening. It's had its biggest impact on lower bond amounts, specifically $1,000 or less. And we definitely need more time to be able to take a look at outcomes for these cases. It's just a little bit too new, but I think we'll be able to take a look at that. Probably another 6 to 9 months will give us enough data and see enough cases coming to conclusion for us to make some determination there.
Great, thank you very much, Brian. That was really interesting. Right. Preliminary, but interesting. This was a big, this is a recommendation by our commission that was adopted by the judges, and so it looks like it's having some good effect. That's great. Thank you again very much for putting that together.
Welcome.
For us. And I might mention, although we're going to skip over the legislative update given the situation since the legislature is not in session, but I will say this. The bill industry has prevailed upon, there's been a bill raised to eliminate the 10% option as a potential release mechanism. So see what happens on that as it works its way through the legislative process. So what I want to do now is balance the time that we have, just have the various agencies give us just a brief sort of update. I know courts and corrections and prosecutors and the public defenders have all really worked toward addressing this pandemic in a variety of ways. And I think it'd be very interesting for each of us as members of this commission to have some understanding of that to the degree to which you're willing to share that with us. So let me just for maybe a couple of minutes each, you can tell us how things are going and how you're sort of changing things to react to this pandemic. So let me ask Judge Carroll to start as our Chief Court Administrator. I know there's been big changes in the court system. So Judge Carroll, if you could make a couple of remarks, so we'd appreciate that very much.
Sure. Can you hear me okay, Judge Devlin?
Yes, I can. Fine.
Okay. Well, obviously, the crisis has presented us with unprecedented challenges, and I think that the court system has done a pretty good job of responding to those challenges. Our priority, as you might well imagine, was to make sure that everybody who works in the courts or comes into the courts was safe. So we started by reducing the number of locations where we were going to continue to do our priority 1 functions, which included primarily criminal arraignments, domestic violence arraignments, and other matters of an emergency nature. We shrunk our size down to 13 courthouses where that business would be done. So essentially that was 1 courthouse in each of our 13 judicial districts. As the crisis escalated and the shortage of personal protection equipment that was needed to protect our employees grew more and more severe, we decided to ultimately reduce down to 6 locations where we would do our business. And even within those 6 locations, we further shrunk the number of days that we were open and the hours that we were open. We did that primarily based upon the data that we were collecting, which demonstrated how much business we were getting on an average each day. And we thought that we could capably move the business to Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule, full days on Mondays and shortened days on Wednesdays and Fridays. And that has worked out pretty well. Again, in an effort to stem the spread of the virus, we sought to find remote solutions inside the courthouse, whereby the public defender, the prosecutor could be in their separate offices conducting business, and the judge, a clerk, and the monitor would remain in the courtroom conducting business. And the arraignment, when it was an incarcerated individual, would take place from the lockup. That's worked out pretty well. There have been some technical challenges, but again, with the goal of protecting people who are working in the courts, I think it's worked out well. We've now rolled out that video process in all of our remaining open courthouses, and the judges are working that system with varying degrees of success. New Haven has been a shining star. Judge Cradle's done a great job on processing matters quickly. Judge Alexander in Bridgeport has been juggling large volume of cases and doing a great job. So I'm pretty happy with the way things have turned out. Things have stabilized a little bit, such that we are looking at opportunities to increase the amount of court work we're doing on a remote basis. We were challenged by the number of VPN licenses that we had that would allow our judges and clerks to function remotely. We got emergency funding from the Office of Policy and Management that allowed us to purchase some 1,500 licenses to pursue that remote work. That has all been deployed now, and we've been able to identify, primarily on the civil and family side, additional work that we should be able to start working on shortly. So we continue to make progress. We understand that there's some frustration out there, and people are eager to get matters handled more efficiently, particularly on the criminal side. Gary Roberge might be able to provide a little more information with respect to our level of cooperation with Commissioner Cook at DOC. And I should also point out that Rich Colangelo, the Chief State's Attorney, and Chris Rapillo, the Chief Public Defender, have been remarkable, I mean remarkable partners in the level of cooperation that they've given the judicial branch, as together we try to address concerns, number one, for the business we have to do, but equally and perhaps even more important for the people who have to do that work. So I hope that gives you a nutshell of what we're doing, Devlin.
That's great, Judge Carroll. Thank you very much. Excellent report.
Thanks.
Good stuff. So let me ask Chief Kowalik from the Norwalk Police Department, one of our larger police departments. How is this issue being confronted by our police agencies?
Okay, thanks. Well, first of all, thankfully, we're doing pretty well. Health-wise, we're doing excellent. We have plenty of PPEs, so that hasn't been an impact for us. Our call volume is down dramatically, probably 30 to 40%, aside from domestic violence calls, which have increased a bit. We're practicing physical distancing, both with our officers and with the public. We're taking many more complaints over the phone. And obviously, we've been avoiding custody arrests whenever possible. From the department standpoint, we've issued laptops to all the civilian staff, so they're working remotely. None of them are in the building anymore. And we're staggering our non-patrol personnel as well, so that they're not all in one division at the same time. So should somebody get sick, it doesn't impact an entire division. And so far, so good. Things have been going extremely well. I'm very pleased overall with how things have gone. Our worst case scenarios have not, thankfully, come to fruition so far.
Great. Thank you very much. Good stuff. Let me ask Richard Colangelo, our new Chief State's Attorney, to let us know how things are going in the Division of Criminal Justice.
Tremendous, Judge. Thanks for asking. We're actually, I mean, working with judicial, just trying to get skeleton crews to figure out who is handling what matters, is working extremely well. Working with Gary Roberge and Chris Rapillo and Commissioner Cook and his people to kind of identify people that we should be looking at. I've made sure that I've reached out to Frank Riccio to see, if there are private defense attorneys that have clients or individuals that, they think, should be out to notify the state's attorney handling the case. And if they don't get responses from them, to let me know so I can make sure that we're going to get those responses and we're handling the information. So we're doing, we're handling the business as best we could.
Things are going very well. I would say that the main issue from a lot of the members is the concern about trying to achieve release for their pretrial detainee clients through motions for bond reduction. I know early on it was sort of slow moving as far as trying to get those matters heard, given the priority one functions. I have seen over the past week or so that there has been movement. The Judge Alexander, for example, is hearing motions on the papers, and will call the defense attorney in if necessary. Judge Strackbein just did one for me yesterday. So while certain attorneys have become a little bit aggravated because things are not happening at the speed at which their clients would like to see, what I've assured them is that if you file a motion, make sure you stay on top of it. Contact the state's attorney handling the case. And as Mr. Colangelo said, he'll certainly assist in any way possible. So while there does seem to be a little bit of aggravation because of this priority one function, I remind the members that priority one functions in criminal court doesn't just simply mean arraignments. As Judge Carroll says, it's other emergency matters. Now, the motions are heard on the papers, many of them. Sometimes it does require argument, but of course, in all instances, the inmates are not being brought in. So we're working through that, and Mr. Colangelo will certainly help out in any way possible. But it has improved over the past week or so. There's still some jurisdictions that I'm hearing motions aren't being heard for no particular reason other than just a lack of manpower. But I'll work together with the Chief State's Attorney's Office on that.
Okay, thank you very much, Attorney Riccio. Good report. We have Commissioner Rapillo. Are you on the phone with us?
I am.
Good, great to hear from you. So how are things going on the public defender end?
Things are going well. We've, as Judge Carroll indicated, we've been collaborating with everyone, trying to get folks out. It started out with lists that Judge Alexander got going. Gary Roborge gave to Rich and I. We got them out to our folks. So people on the ground have been working with each other to identify individuals that can be released. I know that as of Monday, we'd had about 120 people released on promise to appears. There were 35 juveniles that got released. We've done JD cases. There's been some sentence modifications. And I know that about a dozen more people, at least from the reports that I'm getting from the field, have been released through bond modifications, but mostly by agreements. We're starting to move on to have my offices look at lists to see who might be in, particularly on misdemeanor charges, and getting close to being in longer than the maximum, or being up to the maximum period of time they could have gotten on their controlling charge. So once we kind of get those together, we'll approach judicial. I've already talked to Rich to see if we can figure out a way to get those cases resolved, because we don't want people being held longer than they would have been had they been able to come into court to plead. I think we're going to see more people able to get out pretrial. We had some barriers with being able to get in and access our files. I think that was an issue both for my folks and for the prosecutors, but that's been resolved. People are able to go into the closed courthouses and retrieve things. Another issue that we had was being able to communicate with our clients, particularly the incarcerated folks. Courts are closed or have limited hours, and we have issues with forwarding calls, but the folks in the Department of Corrections agreed to post a contact sheet for us. That, I believe, that happened through my legal counsel, Deb Sullivan, and through Nicole Anker. I think that's happening. It lets them know kind of where they can call and list my office as the backup, so that we're able to get to people and figure out what they need and try to get them processed. And I need to give a big thank you to Rich and to Commissioner Ravella. I thank them privately already, but they were able to procure some protective equipment that they were gracious enough to include the public defender's offices in. So, it was great to be remembered, and it's nice to have our people be able to be safe with everybody else in the courthouses.
Good stuff. Thank you very much. Let me call on Commissioner Giles and see how things at the Board of Pardons and Parole. Has your workload changed?
Thanks, Judge. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, yeah, I couldn't get the camera going. So anyway, we're operating as fully as we can. We've divided our clerical staff, so some of them are working from home on alternate days, so we don't have everybody here at once. We've made the transition and the pivot in order to get everything up via video and audio, including victim input. We're live streaming from our website, and the only glitch that we've had, of course, is because we partner with the courts, is weren't able to have our full hearing for pardons in April, and it looks like we're not going to have the May one, but we are still doing expedited. So we've already moved those to what will hopefully be a June docket. And we've been working on our transfer of paroles. I did an executive order to work on that to get some folks out. That was so far, the list was about 80, but I think I have a few more. Those are folks, of course, nonviolent offenders, 50%ers, already been voted to parole, but I can move up a little early to get them out. So we're doing our work over here.
Good stuff. Thank you. Let me ask Natasha Pierre, with respect to our state victim advocate, how's this affected your office?
Well, it's put us at a standstill. Frankly, we haven't had many concerns. We've gotten a lot of DV calls and are connecting them to resources. But we got more calls about, kind of what's in the media, that people will be released. And a lot of our time has been spent reassuring people that, everybody's not being released. We want to thank Commissioner Giles and Commissioner Cook, because we've been in constant contact with those two agencies to address making sure victims are in whatever process is going on. And we have not had any problems at this point. We did have one case where a bond in a DV drug gun issue was significantly reduced from like 700 to 200. And we're just working with that client to make sure they're as safe as they can be.
Great. Thank you very much for that. Let me ask Attorney Mike Chase if you can give us some information about how things are going in the federal court.
Sure. Yeah, so on the federal side, I can speak at least with respect to the defense bar. We've been closely monitoring the infection rates. There's been a lot of cooperation with the folks that are on the CJA panel to track those. And there's been a lot of motion activity for folks to be released when appropriate. Similarly, we've had success where just postponing self-surrender dates, where folks are due to be going in. Judges are working collaboratively with the defense bar, in my experience, to postpone self-surrender dates just to make sure that we're not imposing any additional load on the system. And so, there is a little bit of a difference, of course, in the standards that are applicable in the state courts and the federal courts in terms of compassionate release decisions. And so, the various provisions of the First Step Act provide for one procedure in the federal side, and then the state side is a little bit different. But all in all, this is an issue that clearly the federal defense bar and to some degree the prosecutors are paying a lot of attention to, just to make sure that these issues are getting addressed. Obviously, grand juries new grand juries are not being impaneled, and so there's been somewhat of a downtick there for a little bit. But in terms of trial matters, those things are getting pushed off. But certainly in terms of motion practice with respect to the incarceration issues, I've seen quite a bit of activity on that, and I've obviously personally engaged in some of that activity. And it seems like the judges are working to sort of sort through what makes sense. There's been limitations, of course, for the folks that are incarcerated. Obviously, when folks were going in, there was a 14-day isolation period, which makes the period of incarceration right at the outset extremely difficult. And so that's something that the defense bar is paying quite a bit of attention to, just to make sure that folks who are being sentenced to one thing aren't getting a more severe sentence in the first instance simply because of this public health emergency. So we're adapting to it. We're keeping close eye on the numbers as they expand. A concern I can tell you from defense attorneys, and a concern that I'm hearing repeatedly from clients, is whether or not the numbers are being underreported because of lack of testing, et cetera, within the facilities. And so, there's fear, of course, on behalf of our clients, but we're working with the courts to try and address those issues.
Thank you very much. That's a good report. Thank you. We're almost out of time, but let me ask Gary Roberge of the.
Judge, this is Mark Pelka. I don't know if this is going to work, but I can put I have Commissioner Cook on my cell phone. I can put it next to the speaker. We can give it a shot, but I don't want to take over your meeting, sir. But Commissioner is on the line and he's happy to talk through it.
Sure.
Okay, Commissioner, do you want to try to speak and hopefully we can capture this?
We can give it a try. Everyone hear me?
Good. It's coming through loud and clear. So Commissioner Cook, can you tell us how the Department of Correction, we heard Mark Pelka give us a summary of your release stats, very impressive, but can you fill us in how the Department of Correction is managing this pandemic?
Sure, it's a little bit, we've been a little bit distracted just over the last little bit, so I'm not sure everything's been said. We're dealing with protesters that are impacting our operations up in Enfield and Summers. So it's causing a dangerous situation for everyone that's up there. I think that you probably heard the numbers from Mark, so I don't need to go into that. What I can let you know, I think I heard some people talk about some fears there about their folks worried that there's not enough testing going on inside of our facilities. I would tell you, we're doing as much testing as we possibly can based on what tests are available, and all of that's being based upon someone having symptoms or showing symptoms. Sure, I think there's a lot of things that we're trying to learn about COVID as we move forward that will be learned long after this is all done. But right now, that's our mechanism, is to test those that are showing signs and symptoms. Currently, we've got 161 staff that have tested positive. 15 of them have returned to work. Inmates, there's been 246 that have tested positive. Most of you have heard that we've turned part of Northern into our quarantine units up there. There's 152 inmates up there that are currently quarantined. 67 inmates have returned from Northern to their facilities where they've recovered. They've recovered, so we've removed them from Northern, put them back into their facilities that they originally came from. I heard some of the things that you guys are saying. I would say it's war for us.
Yeah.
And I would tell you that we're constantly trying to keep our employees in PPEs. Making those things available to them has not always been easy. We don't just have the ability to just give everyone their own PPE whenever they walk into the facility. We've had to make sure that we're putting them in places where they can be used, specifically in the quarantine units and so on. We're constantly doing cleaning of our facilities, providing additional supplies and soaps available for all those that are incarcerated. And doing tons of cleaning, including quarantine and isolation units. We've currently finally got some misting units that come in where we can spray and disinfect in a fog type form. Also have some lighting that's coming in that'll help us deal with that. The thing I would say from everyone around this circle, it's been amazing to watch their work and help us from the judicial branch, Board of Pardons, the Chief State's Attorney, public defenders. Everyone's been at the table for us trying to help us reduce our population, which I believe you do see has significantly gone down, and it's been done the right way with public safety and public health in mind. We don't just release someone to the streets, and we don't just do these mass releases. We make sure that we're considering public safety. We consider the victims. We also consider the health and safety of everybody in our facility. The only other thing I can think of is we're working with UConn Health to assist us in some of the acute health care when we can no longer take care of the inmates from our infirmary care. We're working with the hospitals to get them quickly to those hospitals. And unfortunately, we've had one death so far, and hopefully we won't have any more. That's all I've got to report.
That's very good. Thank you very much, Commissioner. That's wonderful. I mean, you get tough duty. I mean, really tough duty for you guys. Thank you very much for that report. So look, we're just about out of time. If anyone else would like to make a comment, any of our commission members would like to say anything at all?
Judge, I was hoping to just say a few things.
Sure, go right ahead, sir.
Okay, thanks. So one area, there's been two areas I thought were possibly worth further commission collaboration or discussion on. I think one is in the area of the particularly vulnerable people who are incarcerated, so people with conditions that make them particularly vulnerable to COVID-19. And I understand there's a process through the parole board called compassionate parole release, and that some news reports have said that the Department of Corrections has provided materials to the Board of Pardons and Parole for people to be considered under that statute. And I did just want to flag, we had done research on that statute in our collateral consequences committee of the commission, and it is quite a narrow statute and tends to look at really factors not well suited, I think, to this particular crisis. And so while there may well be some people who are eligible for relief under that compassionate release statute, I think the situation does call out for sort of another process to consider release for particularly vulnerable people. And so some states, such as New Jersey and Pennsylvania, Minnesota, have established processes by way sort of within the Department of Correction for these temporary releases to home confinement. And so that's sort of a separate process to look at particularly medically vulnerable people for a temporary home confinement. And so I just urge the group to think about that's an authority that already exists in Connecticut, the furlough authority. And so that's an area where you might think about temporary release for particularly medically vulnerable people who are incarcerated. And then the only other area I did want to flag that it sounds like there's been work that's started on, but in terms of the pretrial population, that in the ordinary course, people would be coming back to court, after the initial arraignment and having their cases possibly resolved by time served or a nollie or what have you. And I understand that because that process isn't happening in the ordinary course, that's just an area that it sounded like from Chris Rapilla's comments that they're starting to look at. And so I would just stress, I think that's an important group as well, those pretrial people who sort of had courts not been paused as they would have may well have had their cases resolved by now. So thanks for that. I just wanted to share those two areas where I saw some possibilities for collaboration among sort of multiple areas to address both, that pretrial population and then the particularly medically vulnerable folks who are in the sentence population.
Great. Thank you very much, Professor Russell. Is there anybody else who'd like to comment on either Professor Russell's comments or anything else?
I have a question about, this is Natasha, about the compassionate release in other states. You said it was temporary. What does that mean? And also, do all these people have a place, a family to go live with?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I think the states that have set it up, they've designed processes just to address this situation, and they have, the way I understand it, is sort of a committee to look through a list of medically vulnerable people and to then figure out, is there a place that they can go, what kind of support and supervision is possible in that place, and to make recommendations based on all that information. Because you obviously can't release people just with no place to go. That's not a good idea for anyone.
Okay, and what do they mean by temporary? Have they defined that, or is just too much going on right now to really do that?
And I think along the lines of that, would not last longer than the duration of this crisis, but I'm not sure the details beyond that. But our Commissioner of Correction does have a furlough authority that can release someone for 45 days, and then that can be renewed as well. So we do have that under our law now in Connecticut.
Okay, thanks.
Great. So are there any other comments by anybody? Roberta, do you want to give us a word or two about probation?
Yeah, sure. So adult probation, we continue to operate in all of our offices. If anybody needs information on contact numbers, you can go to our website. It's been posted. But we've been open every day that the court is open in the same hours that the courts are open, and we're keeping in touch with our higher risk clients at the time and the upcoming weeks, all of our clients. So we continue to do our work in adult probation. I'll just follow up real quick on Sarah's comment about the pretrial population, and she's spot on, but I have to say that, you know, the Chief Public Defender's Office and the Division of Criminal Justice, the state's attorneys have been doing an outstanding job with the information we've been providing them. I think the pretrial pop this morning was 2822. We haven't seen that since the 1990s. And any cases that, you know, can move by way of a bond modification to a conditional release or a PTA or a disposition, those things are happening throughout the entire process, and I think that's why we're seeing a lot of movement in addition to the great work that DOC is doing. So I just give a lot of credit to those two agencies for all the work that they're doing, and you know, just look forward to keep making progress while this situation continues on. Judge Devlin, just real quick, I'll give you an update on the juvenile side too. Our detention center this morning, we were down to 48 kids. Beginning of March, we had mid 80s or low 80s. So we've been doing the same thing. I know Chris mentioned that a little bit in her update, and you know, the juvenile probation staff has been doing an outstanding job of working with the judges in Bridgeport and Hartford of getting as many kids out of our detention centers as we've been able to do in the last 2 and 3 weeks. So we've gone from low 80s down to 47 was our lowest number yesterday, and we're at 48 today. And we'll try to continue to make progress on that and get as many kids out into the community as we can. You know, our community programs have been doing a great job of continuing to work with clients, but as staff or some clients test positive in those programs, we have to make sure that they have space to isolate and quarantine our clients in those programs. So it's been a juggling act, but I have to say that the not-for-profit contractors in this state have really stepped up too and have done a tremendous job during this pandemic.
Well, I think that everybody has really shown their mettle here in addressing this stuff. I mean, I'm really impressed by sort of this collaborative effort, and it's been very good to see it. Does anybody else we're sort of over our time now a bit, but does anybody else want to make any further comments? Okay, well, thank you very much for attending this meeting. It's been extremely informative, and carry on. Thank you very much.